Welcome to the Poser Unreal Portal Development Kit features video. This is to show basically how you would build a game using the development kit, a high overview of the various tools available in Unreal Engine, and then how you utilize Poser assets that are brought in and organized as this project inside of Unreal Engine, and how it all comes together to make the Poser's Unreal Portal development kit work. So as you see, this is the Unreal Engine basic layout, main screen of the development environment. It is a development environment for Unreal Engine with the Poser content loaded in there, as well as a whole bunch of custom programming that was done to make this all work. What we'll look at first is a content manager in the lower left hand side. You can, first of all, you can change all the windows if you want to. You can go ahead and make it bigger and smaller. But in general, what you want to do is you'll be talking about the content area, which is on the bottom, the main screen, which is in the top, is where you're building your game in terms of visually building it, and then also the left hand side, we'll talk about some of the modes, some of the ways that you can change this environment besides adding content, which you do from the bottom. And then the right hand side is associated with normally selecting an object in the game and getting information about it. So first we'll talk about the content area. The content area here, it works a lot like Windows. If you go ahead and click on a folder, you'll see the contents of the folder, and there are tiles there that identify the different pieces. So as you see, these folders are where all the content is loaded, and I've loaded a lot of assets from Poser, assets from other available sources that can be included in the game free of charge or with no cost. So public domain available objects. And if you look at the various areas, we could go over all of them, and all of them will be going over content areas will be going over in great detail in separate videos. So in general, I just want you to know that there is this set of folders, and inside of the folders, if you click on it, you'll see the folders underneath there, or if you decide to open up one of the folders, and you'll see the items inside of the folder, the various items. A number of things can be inside of there, and we'll look at some of those. This, for example, is how you'd import your FBX models. You would basically go here, set up a new folder. For example, if it was you're importing something, a figure, you'd go into Poser figures and create a new folder. And once that new folder was there, you would go ahead and import into that folder. And as it imports into the folder, we'll go ahead and open up. We'll open up Ryan here, which you see in a lot of my videos. And if you see in the content in the Ryan folder, there's a bunch of different types of files, and you'll get familiar with these as time goes on. The top ones are a bunch of animations that have been applied to the character. These that show the little thumbnails, the round thumbnails, are materials that are on the Ryan character or in the clothes of Ryan. You have a skeleton, a physics version of it, some UV that is brought in called atlases, and so on. So that's how it goes. You can go find, you can put them wherever you want to in the folders. I've organized the folders in this fashion, and you can extend it or add your own folders. This also has a search, so if I wanted to type in, Allison, it would bring up everything that's associated with Allison in there, which is powerful after you've brought in a lot of things and forget where you've put things. I'm going to go ahead and look next at the other parts. I will come back to the characters in a later part of the video. So that's a content manager, and that's where you store your objects. Over here on the upper right hand corner is modes, and modes really is a number of, has got 5 different modes that you can enter. The top one is basically is a view of the classes, and classes are basically C++ code, containers for the C++ code. So one way of explaining it is you could say, hey, you'd have in here a static mesh. The static mesh would be represented by a class. So if you select these classes, they're much like the same as a static mesh, except they are basically just the code. So if you look at that, there's a number of these, all the classes, and you can see the actual classes are some of the characters themselves. So these are non-playable characters. The second one is you can actually do some painting. You can do painting on models inside of the game, or inside of the windows here inside of the game. You can change the landscape. See how I click landscape, and then it allows you to, for example, make hills, make rivers, and so on. And again, there'll be videos specifically about it. Change material associated with it if you don't like the way the grass looks, and so on. You can sculpt it, you can paint it, and you can just manage it. The other thing is foliage. And how foliage works is you would drop like trees and grass and various things into this area, and then you can paint it on the landscape. So you don't have to place specific trees. You can paint. You can say, hey, I want the brush size to be so big, and then the density to be so big, and it would add bunches of trees at one time instead of just one as you painted along a landscape. And that's much like Vue has a lot of things that does similar things. So there's that, and then you can actually get in here and do some minor work up here in the geometry editing as well. So that's kind of the modes. Of these, you'll probably use the landscape, the foliage, and the painting the most, or adding specific classes if you want to go ahead and build the class, or add the class first and then maybe attach a specific static mesh that you've imported. But that's what the modes are for. The main game window here, it's where you place and move objects. So if I went and found, let's say, a prop, let's go ahead and look in a prop down here in the contents. Let's say an outdoor prop. We'll just say an outdoor bench I have here. You would add an outdoor bench, so you just drag it into the world there. And once it's in the world, you can move it. You can rotate it. Again, it's a lot like Poser. And you can scale it if you wanted to scale it up, make it bigger, smaller. The other things is you have a bunch of commands in here. First of all, I want to show the first one here. If you click down, really shows it's way you kind of set up the overall some messaging and stuff inside of the window. You can show real-time stats. You can show frames per second, a number of things like that as well. Perspective, it allows you to. This is a perspective view. You can just like in you can take a right view, or just like in Poser, except it's from the center of the. So it's not a very good view here. Let's go ahead and go back to perspective. It doesn't look very good in the dark. But again, you can change it, or you can change to a specific camera. I have a number of cameras put inside of this scene, and if I clicked on this camera, a given camera, you would be taken to that camera as well. So that took me to that camera. So there's where camera 2 was, here's where camera 4 was, so on. And so that's the cameras. I'm going to get back out here, away from that camera. Now I'm kind of in a free camera here. The other things you can do in the main window, you can change the lighting model. This is lit, so here's how it looks with all the lights. I can always do it on lit, so that doesn't basically it turns off all the lights and just gives you kind of an on-lit version, on shaded version of it. You can switch to wireframe if you want, occasionally useful, and different types of lighting, just lighting only. And you can see, how well your lighting is going on the various materials, with the materials all being gray, and so on. Again, these are various ways of fine-tuning, especially some of these latest fine-tuning, how you put lights and how you want your environment to look. If I go back to lit, where you normally will be, and these are the options. And this, for example, it says, hey, you don't want to see everything in. You can take off some of the things, like you could take the fog out. There is no fog in this one. You could take out particle systems. I'll show an example of that here. There's a fire. Fire is a particle system, so I'll go ahead and say, hey, remove that, and you no longer see the fire. I'll put it back in. I don't want to see any of the static meshes. These buildings are all static meshes, so you'd say, hey, I don't want to see the static meshes. Boom, you don't see any static meshes, so on. Okay, and then show all the flags associated with the various things. So again, you'll use this the more you get into it. It just helps you move around and isolate different parts of your environment as you're setting it up. So that's the main game window. The world outliner on the right hand side. This is a world outliner, is everything that's in this scene or in this level that you're looking at. So if you click on it, and you can say, focus selected, it'll go and show you Alicia, for example. In this case, it goes right to it, and it's an alphabetic list, and you can see all the objects that are in the level. World settings. Down here, one of the other things too is if you selected that thing, I select Alicia here. I'm going to go ahead and show you that it shows you things about it. So I can move Alicia here using these values instead of using the arrows and so forth. You can also edit, just so one of the things, if it's something you wanted to go edit, you could go ahead and directly click to edit the Alicia, which is basically here's Alicia, and if there's any coding associated with Alicia. The other thing in here, so whatever you select, it'll show you all the details. Whether that be if it's a light, it'll show you all the settings for that light down in the detail section. All the settings for a point light, and so on. So that's how, once you've got an object in here, you can basically, when you put an object in the scene, it's called an instant version of that object, and you can go ahead and change that instance version to be different than the other one. So I could put 4-point lights and have the 4-point lights have different parameters associated with them in the scene. Okay, the world outliner is the other one here, the world settings, and that's where you go ahead and set up just the basic game, how the game is going to go work. And you do this just once. It's usually different by level. I mean, you do it once for each level to identify how you want the game to work. And again, there'll be videos on all this, spending a whole bunch of time talking about each one of these subjects. The top bar, typical things that you can do. You can save the game. This is not hooked up to source control right now, but that's where that would be. content just takes you on a content manager. Marketplace hooks you up into Unreal Engine's marketplace to buy things if you want, so on. You can set different settings, overall settings for how the engine works there. You can go into blueprints. The key thing with blueprints is they're down here in the content manager, except for the level blueprints, which are here, and that means this is a blueprint associated with the level you're in. So this is just associated with the commons level. This is a code associated with that level only, and that's how you get into that. Again, we'll talk about that in a little more detail. Cinematics I'll go ahead and open it. I do have one cinematics in here associated with the dance party. And what it is something I've told you a little bit about before, but it's basically the way to go ahead and what this is in the bottom part shows up all the different cameras, or you could have objects, whatever. And then these are keyframes, and these keyframes basically, are the position of the camera in most cases, and a keyframed animation to move the different pieces. And then there's a director group that says, hey, I want to use a fly around shot first, and I want to use a zoom connect, and it switches between cameras. I want to use a dress camera, and so on, which are cameras down here, and that's up here in this middle piece. And you can set curves up as well to go ahead and make the movement of the camera, the movement of the characters. It doesn't have to be linear. It can follow a curve. But again, this will be a whole, and this is how you actually set up basically in-world managed movement of characters and cameras in the game. For cutscenes especially, it's great. That is the cinematics. And then the other thing you can do, obviously, is you're building your game here. You can, whenever you want to, see here's a camera actor. It shows you an example of one of the camera actors. I can play the game. I just click play there, and it launches the game itself, which you've seen versions of it in this little window. So you can make little changes inside of the IDE, launch a game, play it, see if the changes you made worked, and stop. And that's about it for these things. Now, if I went ahead and real quick, let's go ahead to the main thing. Is since you're in Poser and you're Poser users, most of you, it's the figures. So if I go look at the figures, and let's go find Ryan, and then bring Ryan in. I just wanted to show you what a figure looks like. Here's the figures. Here's Ryan. There's three major pieces to a figure up in the right-hand corner. There's the skeleton, the mesh, and then the animation. The skeleton is the bones. The mesh is a rig on is a skeletal mesh that's been rigged to that skeleton. And animations are associated again with the skeleton and the mesh. So here's Ryan, naked as he is. First of all, let's talk about the skeleton. Skeleton, again, it's the bone hierarchy that was brought in when you imported the Poser figure. The other thing you can do to this, though, for example, is you can add sockets to it. And so, for example, I've added sockets here that were associated on the right hand with a right hand socket and the iron sight in order to place guns on his right hand and for shooting guns in a couple of different positions. So you can basically add those sockets, and you attach your props to those sockets. So that's one of the things that you can do with skeletons. Mesh, one of the things is morphs, obviously. As you can see, here's all the morphs, associated with Ryan. And you can test these morphs. There he is being a little bit happy, or a little bit of joy. Take his joy down, maybe he wants to laugh. Ha 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 ha. And then these are 0 to 1, or -1 to 1. But you can always just, if you really wanted to do crazy, let's say heavy, let's say hit it a 1, and say his face isn't heavy enough. You could change that to 10 if you wanted to. That doesn't really do much there. Maybe joy would be a better one. Let's take him up to 10. Crazy! It just makes it unusable. But again, the point is that you can go ahead and set up. The slider switches are set up from -1 to 1 in the game. The You can also, if you wanted to, add a mesh. Let's say you want to see how his shirt looks on him. You can go ahead and let's say add a shirt, and so you could dress him if you wanted to. And in here, this doesn't actually dress a character that you put in the game, but it does allow you to preview how the clothes are going to go look on him, and that's based on the fact that they utilize. Even those clothes utilize this Ryan idle skeleton mesh up on the right-hand side that this figure or mesh is associated with. The clothes use the same skeleton. The other thing is the level of detail is the over here is the different pieces of the. These are the materials associated with different parts of the body that was brought in by the import, and you can see there's a whole mess of them. And if you double-click on it, you go into the materials editor, which looks a lot like the advanced editor here, and basically this is saying, hey, your base color, instead of being a color, in this kind of case it's a UV map, again, that was brought in by the import and export. And then there's a number of different things you can set up, either down here in the details area, change how you want that material to be utilized, parameters for this material, this texture sample, and metallic, specular, roughness, emissive color in general of the material. So you can make it look really shiny with metallic, or really rough with a roughness setting. Specular, again, is sort of like metallic. It's how it reflects to light. Emissive color to make it project its own color. Change it into a normal map. And a number of other things too. Again, there'll be tons of videos associated with this on the internet. Plus, I'll be going over how to best utilize the material room for the things you bring in from Poser. Let's go back out of the material room. And animations. You've seen animations. It's basically double-click it, and you can see how it'll look. Let's throw in a pitch, whatever. So again, this is animations. You can go down here and change how the animation works. You can loop it or not loop it. You can change its rate, how fast it goes, and all kinds of other options you have on a given animation. A special kind of animation is called a blend space, and I start them all with BS. And so here's a blend space, and you can kind of test it by basically I put 3 animations here in the blend space. I had an idle where he stands there, I have a walk, and I have a run, and then basically wherever the value is between 0 and 100 is applied to that. He'll start walking, he'll transition very nicely, he'll start running, and then basically you can control that and through a script or a blueprint, you can go ahead and basically match that to how the keys you're using on your keyboard in terms of interacting with the character. So that's basically kind of a quick walkthrough of the various major tools you'll use inside of the development kit. Again, they're all Unreal Engine based with that have been loaded with Poser assets, and we'll just wanted again to let you see that. So thanks for tuning in.